As Sarah gathered her few belongings, most of which seemed to be plant samples and research notes, Professor Zexhai approached her. "Dr. Chen," she said quietly, "thank you, not just for saving the station, but for helping my students understand." "Understand? What?" "That the most dangerous predators don't always look dangerous," the professor replied, "and that true strength often comes wrapped in unexpected packages." Sarah paused at the door, looking back at the class of alien students who were staring at her with a mixture of awe, terror, and newfound respect. "Professor," she said, "there's one more thing your students should know about humans." "What's that?" "We're not the most dangerous species in the galaxy because we're the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced." She smiled that gentle, terrifying smile one more time. "We're the most dangerous because we care about others more than we care about ourselves." With that, she was gone, leaving behind a classroom full of students who would never again underestimate anything that looked harmless. Epilogue: The New Understanding. 3 months after what became known as the Kepler Station incident, Professor Zexhai stood before a packed auditorium at the Galactic University. Representatives from dozens of species had come to hear her revised lecture on human psychology and defensive capabilities. "The question," she began, "is not why Earth is classified as a death world. The question is why humans call it home." In the front row, several of her former students sat with notebooks ready. Kira had regained her full color and opacity. Veltar's mandibles no longer chattered when humans were mentioned. Even Pip seemed more confident, though he still jumped whenever someone mentioned Dr. Sarah Chen's name. "What we learned that day," the professor continued, "is that humans don't see their world as a place of danger to be survived. They see it as a place of challenges to be overcome, beauties to be appreciated, and mysteries to be solved." She gestured to a new holographic display, not just of Earth, but of a dozen human colonies scattered across the galaxy. "In the 6 months since the exchange program began, humans have established successful settlements on worlds we classified as uninhabitable. They've turned asteroid fields into mining operations, gas giants into fuel depots, and ice worlds into agricultural centers." An Altarian delegate raised a crystalline hand. "Professor, are you suggesting that humans are uniquely suited for colonization?" "I'm suggesting," Zexhai replied, "that humans are uniquely suited for survival, and that may be the most important quality in a galaxy that's larger and more dangerous than any of us previously imagined." She clicked to the next slide, showing a map of explored space. "We've been operating under the assumption that most worlds are too dangerous for habitation by civilized species. But what if we've been thinking about it wrong? What if instead of avoiding dangerous worlds, we should be learning from the species that conquered one?" The auditorium buzzed with excited conversation. The implications were staggering. "Which brings me," Professor Zexhai said, raising her voice to quiet the crowd, "to the new human integration program." The room fell silent. "The Galactic Council, after extensive deliberation, has approved the expansion of human exchange programs to over 50 worlds. But this time they won't be coming as students or researchers." She paused for dramatic effect. "They'll be coming as teachers." In the back of the auditorium, Dr. Sarah Chen smiled quietly to herself. She had been asked to attend the lecture as an honored guest, though she was much more interested in the botanical samples she had collected from the asteroid gardens of Vega 7. After the lecture, as the crowd dispersed, Kira approached her nervously. "Dr. Chen," the young Altarian said, "I wanted to thank you again for saving the station." "You already thanked me," Sarah replied warmly. "Several times." "I know, but I also wanted to ask you something." Kira's form flickered slightly with nervousness. Would you be willing to teach me?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Teach you what?" "How to be brave," Kira said simply. "How to face dangerous things instead of running from them." Sarah studied the young alien for a moment, then smiled. "Kira, you already know how to be brave. You just demonstrated it by asking that question. But I want to learn to be brave like humans." Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "Can I tell you a secret about human bravery?" Kira nodded eagerly. We're terrified most of the time, Sarah admitted. The only difference between humans and other species isn't that we don't feel fear. It's that we've learned fear is just information, not an instruction. She gestured toward the viewport where stars gleamed in the darkness beyond. Every time we go into space, we're scared. Every time we land on a new world, we're scared. Every time we meet a new species, we're scared. Then how do you do it? Sarah's smile was warm and genuine. We do it because there are people we care about counting on us. We do it because the universe is too beautiful to experience from a distance. And we do it because someone has to. She looked around at the departing crowd, dozens of species who were beginning to see the galaxy through new eyes. And now, she said quietly, it's not just humans anymore. As Sarah walked away, Kira stood in the empty auditorium, watching the stars and thinking about courage, fear, and the strange species that had taught her the difference between running from the dark and running toward the light. Outside, in the cold vacuum of space, a human transport ship was approaching the station, carrying the first group of human teachers to worlds that had never seen their kind before. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place, and somewhere in the cosmic dark, the descendants of a small blue death world were preparing to teach the universe that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their capacity for hope. The end. The emergency beacon screamed across 17 star systems, its desperate signal cutting through the cosmic void like a knife through silk. On the bridge of the Galactic Council ship Harmony's Edge, Commander Zith Ka's 4 eyes dilated in terror as the message played for the 3rd time. This is Research Station Kepler-7 to any receiving vessel. Omega-12 has been released. Repeat, Omega-12 containment has failed. All Council species are advised to evacuate this sector immediately. The humans did something. They're still fighting it. How are they still fighting it? The transmission cut to static. Zith Ka's crystalline fingers trembled as they reached for the communications array. Around the bridge, crew members from a dozen different species stood frozen. The Veltar navigator's purple skin had turned an ashen gray. The Corvin engineer's usually steady hands shook as he gripped his console. "Sir," whispered Lieutenant Jex-9, his mechanical voice unit struggling to process the emotion. Omega-12 was classified as an extinction-level entity. No known species has ever survived direct contact for more than 17 minutes. Zith Ka nodded grimly. They all knew the stories. Omega-12 had wiped out the ancient precursors. It had consumed the war-loving Krex Empire in a single day. Entire civilizations had simply vanished when it appeared. "Set course for the outer rim," Zith Ka commanded. "Maximum warp. Alert all Council vessels to wait." The communications officer, a young Altarian named Velsi, looked up from her station with confusion written across her face. "I'm receiving another transmission from the Kepler-7 sector." "That's impossible," Gex-9 stated flatly. "Nothing survives in an Omega-12 zone for more than—" "It's from a human vessel." Velsi interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Every being present knew the humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Council. They were young, barely out of their home system, with primitive technology and strange customs. Most council members considered them little more than curious pets. "Put it through," Zith Ka ordered. Static filled the bridge. Then a gruff human voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human cargo vessel, Persistence. If anyone's listening out there, we've got a situation. The research station got hit by something nasty, but we managed to evacuate about 300 survivors. Problem is, the thing that attacked them is still here and it's not letting us leave." Another voice cut in, younger, more excited. "Captain, it's trying to breach Deck 7 again." "Hold your position, Martinez. We've handled worse." Chen's voice remained steady, almost casual. "To any council ships listening, we could use some backup, but honestly, we've got this under control. This thing bleeds just like everything else." Zith Ka's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. Did Did that human just say they made Omega-12 bleed? The transmission continued. We've been fighting this thing for 6 hours now. Lost some good people, but we're learning its patterns. Johnson figured out it doesn't like high-frequency sound waves, and Rodriguez discovered its outer shell is vulnerable to concentrated plasma fire. We're actually winning. Every crew member on the bridge exchanged glances. Winning? Against Omega-12? The concept was so foreign it barely registered in their minds. Send an immediate message to Earth Command, Zithka ordered. Ask them how many human ships are in this sector. The answer came back within minutes, delivered by a cheerful human communications officer whose image appeared on the main screen. She had short brown hair and was actually smiling despite the crisis reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Oh, you mean the Kepler-7 incident? Yeah, we've got about 40 ships in that area. Mix of cargo haulers, mining vessels, and a couple of our newer exploration ships. Why do you ask? 40 ships. Zithka's voice cracked. In an Omega-12 zone? Is that a lot? We had more, but some got damaged in the fighting, so we sent them to the outer perimeter. Don't worry, though, Captain Chen's coordinating the response. That woman once held off a pirate fleet with nothing but a cargo hauler and pure stubbornness. The human's image flickered as an explosion echoed in the background. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at the screen with mild annoyance. Excuse me for a second. Hey, Johnson! I told you to warn me before you set off those charges. You nearly made me spill my coffee. She turned back to Zithka with an apologetic smile. Sorry about that. We're helping clear some debris so the rescue ships can get through. This Omega-12 thing made quite a mess when it showed up. But honestly, it's not as tough as we expected. Captain Rodriguez compared it to that giant space whale we fought off Proxima last month. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of Harmony's Edge in stunned silence. Sir, Gex 9 said slowly, Should we offer assistance? Zithka stared at the empty screen where the human officer had been. 40 ships, fighting Omega-12, treating it like just another Tuesday. Set course for Earth, he said finally. I think the Galactic Council needs to have a very different conversation with humanity. As Harmony's Edge jumped to warp, one thought echoed through every mind on the bridge. What kind of species treats the universe's greatest threat like routine pest control? The answer they were about to learn would change everything they thought they knew about survival, courage, and what it meant to be human. Chapter 2. Rules are made to be broken, Captain. Sarah Chen ducked as another chunk of twisted metal flew past her head, the result of Omega-12's latest attempt to break through the reinforced bulkhead of Deck 7. Around her, the corridors of the cargo vessel, Persistence, looked like a war zone. Scorch marks decorated the walls, emergency lighting cast everything in an ominous red glow, and the air tasted of ozone and burnt circuitry. Martinez, she called out, not bothering to activate her comm unit. The young engineer was only 20 feet away, welding another support beam into place. How's it looking? Getting creative, Captain, Martinez replied, his voice muffled by his welding mask. This thing keeps trying new approaches. First it was brute force, then some kind of acid, now it's using sonic attacks. It's learning. Chen nodded grimly. In her 15 years of deep space work, she'd faced pirates, equipment failures, stellar phenomena that could cook a ship in seconds, and once, memorably, a nest of Andromedan space wasps that had somehow gotten into the cargo hold. But Omega-12 was different. It wasn't just dangerous. It was intelligent, adaptive, and according to every piece of Council data they'd managed to access, absolutely unstoppable. The problem was, nobody had told the humans that. Rodriguez. Status report. Chen spoken to. Her comm. Still holding Deck 12, Captain. Lost another section of hull plating, but we've rigged up some additional barriers. This thing hits hard, but it's not very creative about it. Same attack patterns every time. That was Rodriguez. Analytical to the core. If there was a pattern to find, she'd find it. If there was a weakness to exploit, she'd exploit it. Chen had served with her for 3 years, and the woman treated every problem like a puzzle to be solved rather than a threat to be feared. Chen's comm crackled again. Captain, this is Johnson in engineering. I've been analyzing the readings from our encounters with the hostile, and I think I know why the Council species couldn't fight it effectively. I'm listening. They were following their own rules. Every species in the Council has specific behavioral patterns, right? The Veltar always retreat when facing superior numbers. The Corvin always try to out-tech their problems. The Zephyrians always attempt diplomatic solutions first. But this thing, Omega-12, it's encountered all these species before. It knows exactly how they'll respond. Chen felt a cold smile spread across her face. But it's never fought humans. Exactly. We don't have established patterns because we're too new to the galaxy. We're completely unpredictable from its perspective. As if summoned by their conversation, a new sound echoed through the ship. A low thrumming vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The lights flickered and several crew members nearby grabbed onto handholds as the ship shuddered. That's new, Martinez commented, pulling off his welding mask. Sounds like it's trying to resonate with our hull frequency. Classic precursor. Destruction technique, added Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the ship's science officer, as she rounded the corner with a tablet full of readings. According to the data we pulled from the research station, Omega-12 used this exact method to collapse precursor megastructures. The vibration builds until the target literally shakes itself apart. How long do we have? Chen asked. Based on precursor ships? About 10 minutes. Chen looked around at her crew. Martinez was already grabbing his tools, heading back to work, on the reinforcements. Rodriguez was studying her tactical display, no doubt planning their next move. Johnson's voice was coming through the comm, rattling off possible solutions at his usual breakneck pace. Dr. Tanaka was taking readings, treating this like any other scientific phenomenon to be understood and overcome. Not one of them looked scared, concerned, yes, focused, absolutely, but not scared. You know what I love about working with humans? Chen said to no one in particular. What's that, Captain? Martinez called out. We're too stupid to know when we're supposed to give up. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Somewhere, in the distance, an alarm began to sound. Johnson, Chen spoke into her comm. You said the precursors couldn't counter this technique? That's right, Captain. Their ships were too rigid, too precisely engineered. When the resonance frequency hit, they couldn't adapt quickly enough. Good thing human engineering is held together with duct tape and stubbornness. Martinez, how flexible are our hull connections? Martinez paused in his welding and looked up with a grin that would have terrified any sane engineer. Flexible enough to survive a Category 5 storm on Titan, Captain. Want me to make them more flexible? Dr. Tanaka, I need you to monitor the resonance frequency. When it peaks, I want to know immediately. Captain, Rodriguez's voice came through the comm. I'm reading multiple breach attempts across 7 different sections. It's coordinating a full assault. Chen felt her pulse quicken, but not with fear, with anticipation. This was the moment she lived for, when everything was on the line, when the situation was impossible, when victory depended on doing something nobody expected. All hands, this is the captain. Omega-12 is making its big play. It thinks it understands how to kill us because it's killed everyone else the same way. It thinks we're just another council species that'll fold under pressure. She paused, looking around at the determined faces of her crew. Let's show it what happens when you pick a fight with humans who've got nothing left to lose and too much coffee in their systems. The ship groaned as the resonance frequency climbed higher. Through the bulkhead, they could hear Omega-12 pressing its attack, testing every weakness, probing every defense. It was exactly where they wanted it. Martinez, are those hull modifications ready? Ready and waiting, Captain. Dr. Tanaka, frequency status? Approaching critical resonance in 30 seconds. Rodriguez, weapon status? All systems charged and locked on target. Chen took a deep breath, feeling the familiar calm that came over her in moments like this. Around the galaxy, entire civilizations had fled in terror from the entity now attacking her ship. The greatest military forces in known space had been swept aside like leaves in a hurricane, but they'd never faced a human cargo crew who'd decided that Tuesday was as good a day as any to kill a god. Execute on my mark, Chen said quietly. And remember, we're not trying to survive this fight. We're trying to win it. Outside the ship, Omega-12 pulsed with confidence. In a few more seconds, the resonance would reach critical frequency, and another vessel would join the countless thousands it had destroyed over the millennia. The pattern was always the same: fear, desperation, and finally, inevitable collapse. But this time, something was different. This time, its prey was smiling back. Chapter 3: The Art of Human Warfare. The moment came like a held breath finally. Released. Critical resonance in 3, 2, 1. Mark. Dr. Tanaka's voice cut through the chaos. Now Martinez. Martinez slammed his hand down on the emergency release controls he'd been modifying for the past 20 minutes. Throughout the persistence, hull clamps that had been designed to hold cargo containers in place suddenly disengaged in a carefully orchestrated sequence. The ship didn't just absorb the killing resonance frequency, it danced with it, where a rigid precursor vessel would have shattered. The human cargo hauler bent and flexed like a reed in a hurricane. Sections of the hull actually separated by several inches before snapping back into place, dissipating the destructive vibrations harmlessly into space. What the hell? The voice belonged to Captain Torres of the mining ship Stubborn Mule, broadcasting on the general frequency. Chen, did your ship just wiggle? Adaptive engineering, Torres, Chen replied, allowing herself a small smile. Sometimes the best way to survive a storm is to learn how to dance with it. But the dance was far from over. Through the viewports they could see Omega-12 clearly for the first time. A writhing mass of dark energy and twisted matter that defied easy description. It was beautiful in the way that natural disasters were beautiful, terrible, awesome, and absolutely lethal. Captain, Rodriguez's voice was tight with concentration. It's adapting again. The entity is shifting tactics. Multiple smaller probes instead of one large resonance attack. Chen nodded. This was the part that had probably doomed every other species. They'd survived the first assault, maybe even the second. But Omega-12 learned from every encounter, and it had thousands of years of experience to draw from. The humans had been in space for barely a century. Johnson, Chen called through the comm, please tell me you have good news about those weapon modifications. Better than good, Captain. Remember how I said this thing bleeds? Well, I've been analyzing the samples we collected from our earlier hits. Its outer shell isn't actually organic, it's some kind of programmable matter. The same stuff the precursors used for their megastructures. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her readings with sudden understanding. If it's programmable matter, then it operates on quantum frequencies. We should be able to disrupt its cohesion with the right kind of interference pattern. Exactly. And our cargo transporters operate on a very similar quantum band. I can recalibrate them to create destructive interference instead of matter transportation. Chen felt that familiar surge of pride in her crew. This was what humans did. They took whatever was available and found a way to make it work. No elegant solutions, no perfect technology, just good old-fashioned ingenuity and a complete willingness to break anything that might help them win. Do it. How long do you need? Give me 5 minutes, you've got 3. Rodriguez, what's our tactical situation? Not great, Captain. We've got 17 human ships in direct engagement, but Omega-12 is coordinating its attacks better than before. It's using smaller fragments to probe our defenses while the main mass focuses on the ships with the heaviest armament. Through the viewport, Chen could see the battle unfolding across several cubic kilometers of space. The mining ship Iron Will was locked in close combat with a tendril of dark matter that kept trying to wrap around its rotating sections. Captain Okafor's voice came through the comm, calm as if he were discussing the weather. This thing really doesn't like our drill arrays. Every time I spin up the main excavator, it pulls back. Think it's never encountered industrial mining equipment before. That was the thing about humans, Chen reflected. They didn't have dedicated warships like the other council species. They had cargo haulers, mining vessels, exploration ships, and colony transports. But every single one of those ships had been built by people who understood that space was trying to kill you every second of every day. and the only way to survive was to build things tough and figure out how to fight with whatever you had. Captain Chen. The voice belonged to Dr. Sarah Kim, broadcasting from the research vessel Curiosity. I've been analyzing the entity's behavior patterns, and I think I know why it's so effective against council species. Go ahead, Dr. Kim. It's not just that it adapts to their tactics, it's that it fundamentally understands their psychology. The Veltar always prioritize preservation of their collective knowledge. The Corvin always seek technological solutions. The Zephyrians always try to find common ground. Omega-12 has learned to exploit these behavioral patterns over thousands of years. But humans are different, Chen said, beginning to understand. Exactly. We don't have a unified behavioral pattern, because we're not a unified species. A human mining captain thinks differently from a human scientist, who thinks differently from a human cargo hauler. We're unpredictable because we're individually diverse in ways that other species aren't. As if to prove her point, Captain Martinez, of the exploration ship Wanderer, came on the comm with his own update. Hey everyone, I think I figured out something interesting. This thing keeps trying to cut off our escape routes, right? Classic predator behavior. But what if we don't? Want to escape? Martinez, what are you thinking? Chen asked. I'm thinking this thing has spent millennia learning how to hunt prey that runs away. What if we're not prey? What if we're pack hunters, and it just wandered into our territory? The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. Every species that had faced Omega-12 had tried to survive it, to escape it, to outlast it. None of them had tried to hunt it. Johnson, how are those weapon modifications coming? Just finished, Captain. All cargo transporters have been recalibrated. We've essentially turned this ship into a giant quantum disruption array. Rodriguez, coordinate with the other ships. I want firing solutions on every major mass concentration of the entity. Already working on it, Captain. Captains Torres, Okafor, and Kim are reporting similar weapon modifications complete. Chen looked out at the swirling mass of Omega-12, this ancient terror that had destroyed civilizations and consumed entire star systems. For the first time in probably millions of years, it was facing an enemy that refused to be prey. All ships. This is Captain Chen. We've spent the last 6 hours learning how this thing fights. Now it's time to teach it how humans die. She paused, feeling the weight of the moment. We're not running, we're not hiding, we're hunting, and we're bringing this thing down. Across the battle zone, 17 human ships began to move with sudden coordinated purpose. They weren't fleeing or desperately defending anymore. They were attacking. And for the first time in its ancient existence, Omega-12 began to understand what fear felt like. Chapter 4. When Gods Bleed. The first coordinated strike hit Omega-12 like a hammer blow from 17 different directions simultaneously. Captain Chen watched through the viewport as quantum disruption beams tore into the entity's outer shell, each hit causing sections of its dark matter composition to simply stop existing. Where the beam struck, Omega-12 didn't just take damage, it lost coherence, pieces of its fundamental structure dissolving back into base energy. Direct hits across all targets, Rodriguez reported, barely able to contain her excitement. The entity is showing signs of structural damage. But even as she spoke, Omega-12 began to adapt. The damaged sections started to reform, drawing matter from other parts of its massive form. What had been a single cohesive entity began to split into multiple smaller masses, each one adopting different defensive patterns. It's learning, Dr. Tanaka observed, distributing its mass to minimize the effectiveness of our concentrated fire. Good, Chen said grimly. That means it's thinking defensively instead of offensively. Johnson, can you adjust our weapons to track multiple smaller targets? Already on it, Captain. But we're going to need to get creative. This thing is trying to use classic swarm tactics. Through the comm system, voices from across the human fleet provided a constant stream of updates and observations. This is Captain Okafor on the Iron Will. These smaller fragments are faster, but they're also more fragile. My mining lasers are cutting right through them. Captain Torres here. The stubborn mule is engaging 3 fragments simultaneously. They're trying to surround us, but our cargo. Bay doors make excellent shield arrays when you slam them shut fast enough. Dr. Kim reporting from Curiosity. I'm seeing fascinating adaptive behavior. Each fragment seems to retain some of the original entity's learning capacity, but they're having trouble coordinating with each other. Chen nodded as she processed the information. This was how humans fought, not with grand strategies or overwhelming technology, but with constant adaptation and shared intelligence. Every captain was solving their own tactical problems while contributing to the overall battle plan. Martinez, she called to her engineer, who was now stationed at the modified weapons array. I need you to try something. Instead of targeting the fragments directly, can you create disruption fields between them? Between them? That's actually brilliant, Captain. If I can generate interference patterns in the space they're using to coordinate, it should disrupt their communication. As Martinez worked, Chen found herself thinking about the conversation with Dr. Kim earlier. Omega-12 had spent millennia learning to hunt species that thought in predictable patterns, but humans didn't just think differently from other species. They thought differently from each other. All ships. This is Chen. New tactical approach. Stop trying to kill this thing with coordinated strikes. Everyone pick your own strategy, and go with it. Confuse the hell out of it. What happened next would have horrified any proper military strategist, but it was beautiful in its chaotic effectiveness. Captain Okafor began using his mining ship like a massive drill, boring straight through fragments while his industrial equipment tore them apart from the inside. Captain Torres started playing a deadly game of tag, using her cargo hauler's superior maneuverability to stay just out of reach while taking pot shots with improvised weapons. Dr. Kim turned her research vessel into a mobile laboratory, analyzing fragments in real time and broadcasting weaknesses to the other ships, and Captain Martinez of the Wanderer. Captain Martinez did something that would be talked about in human spacer bars for generations to come. Hey everyone. His voice came over the comm, completely casual. Remember how I said we should hunt this thing instead of running from it? Well, I just figured out how pack hunters actually work. On Chen's tactical display, she watched in amazement as the Wanderer suddenly accelerated directly toward the largest remaining fragment of Omega-12. But instead of firing weapons, Martinez was broadcasting on all frequencies, not communications, but raw sensor data. What the hell are you doing, Martinez? Captain Torres demanded. I'm calling it out, Martinez replied. This thing has been apex predator for millions of years. It doesn't know how to handle being challenged directly. The fragment of Omega-12 that Martinez was approaching began to shift and consolidate, drawing mass from other fragments. Within seconds, it had reformed into something resembling its original configuration. Massive, powerful, and focused entirely on the small exploration ship racing toward it. Martinez, you insane son of a... Captain Okafor's voice trailed, off as understanding dawned. You magnificent bastard. You're making it concentrate its mass again. Exactly. Scattered, it's hard to kill permanently. But if I can make it angry enough to pull itself back together, we can hit it with everything we've got, Chen finished. She felt a surge of admiration for the younger captain. It was a crazy plan, the kind of desperate gambit that should have gotten everyone killed. It was also completely, perfectly human. All ships, prepare for coordinated strike on my mark. Martinez, how long can you stay ahead of that thing? Long. Enough, Captain. This old girl might not look like much, but she's got some moves left in her. For the next 3 minutes, the battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse as Martinez led the reconstituted Omega-12 on a chase through the debris field left by the earlier fighting. The entity, driven by what could only be described as rage, pursued with single-minded determination, growing larger and more concentrated with every passing second. It's working, Dr. Tanaka reported. The entity is approaching 90% mass consolidation, but Captain Martinez is running out of maneuvering room. Martinez, status report. Getting a little warm over here, Captain, but I'm still in one piece. This thing is fast, but it's not very good at sharp turns. Chen watched the tactical display as the Wanderer led Omega-12 through an increasingly tight spiral, the ancient entity gaining ground with every loop. In 30 seconds, maybe less, Martinez would be caught. Now, Chen shouted, All ships maximum power target the core mass. 17 quantum disruption beams lanced out simultaneously, striking the consolidated form of Omega-12 from every angle. But this time, instead of the scattered defensive fire from before the humans had had time to coordinate, the beams intersected at precise points, creating cascading interference patterns that tore through Omega-12's structure like paper. The entity's death scream echoed across multiple dimensions, a sound that registered on sensors as everything from radio waves to gravitational distortions. For a moment that lasted eternity, space itself seemed to convulse as millions of years of accumulated dark matter and stolen energy exploded outward in a brilliant, terrible light. Then suddenly, silence. Where Omega-12 had been, there was nothing but empty space and dissipating energy signatures. Is it? Captain Torres's voice was barely a whisper. Confirmed, Dr. Kim reported, her scientific training keeping her voice steady even as her hands shook. No coherent energy patterns, no quantum signatures. Whatever Omega-12 was, it's not anymore. For a long moment, the human fleet hung motionless. In space, 17 ships and their crews trying to process what they'd just accomplished. They'd killed something that was supposed to be unkillable. They'd won a fight that every other species in the galaxy had lost. Well, Captain Martinez said finally, his voice carrying across the comm with characteristic understatement. That was interesting. The laughter that followed started small, a chuckle from Captain Okafor, a snort from Dr. Kim. But it grew, spreading from ship to ship until all 17 crews were laughing together, the kind of wild, slightly hysterical laughter that comes after surviving something impossible. All ships, this is Captain Chen, she said when the laughter finally died down. Damage reports? The responses came back quickly. Hull breaches, system failures, depleted power cores, and exhausted crews. But no deaths. Somehow, miraculously, they'd all made it through. What now, Captain? Rodriguez asked quietly. Chen looked out at the stars, thinking about the Galactic Council ships that were probably still fleeing in terror, about the civilizations that had lived in fear of Omega-12 for millennia, about the look on Commander Zithka's face when he learned what had happened here. Now, she said with a smile, now we go home and try to explain to Earth Command why our cargo run took an extra week. But even as she said it, Chen knew that nothing would ever be quite the same. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Not as another client species seeking protection, but as the apex predators who hunted things that other civilizations couldn't even face. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. Epilogue. The new rules 6 months later, the conference room aboard the Galactic Council headquarters station resembled a zoo more than a diplomatic venue. Representatives from 47 different species had crammed themselves into a space designed for 12, all of them trying to get a closer look at the small group of humans seated calmly at the center table. Captain Sarah Chen, now bearing the somewhat ridiculous title of Special Advisor for Extinction-Level Threat Response, sat between Admiral Rebecca Torres, formerly Captain Torres of the Stubborn Mule, and Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who had been promoted to head of the newly formed Human Council Joint Research Initiative. Across from them, Commander Zithka looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His 4 eyes were bloodshot, and his crystalline skin had taken on a distinctly gray tinge that Chen had learned indicated extreme stress in his species. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Zithka said for the 3rd time, consulting his notes with the desperate precision of someone trying to make sense of the impossible. When faced with Omega-12, your species' response was to argue with it? Not argue, Chen corrected patiently. Hunt, there's a difference. You turned a cargo vessel into a weapon capable of disrupting quantum-level matter coherence using spare parts and what you call duct tape? Actually, it was mostly the cargo transporters, Dr. Tanaka interjected helpfully. The duct tape was just for the hull modifications. A representative from the Veltar Collective, a species that had lost 3 entire colonies to Omega-12 over the past millennium, leaned forward with what Chen had learned to recognize as desperate hope. Could Could this technique be replicated? Could other species learn to fight as humans fight? Admiral Torres exchanged a glance with Chen before answering. Well, you could try. But honestly, I'm not sure it would work for most of you. Why not? The question came from a dozen different voices simultaneously. Because, Chen said gently, you all think too much alike within your species. When humans face a problem, we get 17 different solutions from 17 different people. Half of them are crazy, 3 of them are impossible, and 1 of them usually works just well enough to save everyone's lives. She gestured to the crowd of representatives. But when your species face a problem, you get one solution that everyone agrees is the logical, proper, culturally appropriate response, which works great most of the time. But when you're facing something that's had millions of years to learn how you think, it kills you, finished Dr. Tanaka matter-of-factly. The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. Finally, a Corvin engineer who had been scribbling notes throughout the entire session looked up with the expression Chen couldn't quite read. Are you saying, the Corvin asked slowly, that humanity's greatest tactical advantage is that you are all insane? Chen considered this seriously. I prefer creatively unpredictable, but honestly, yeah, that's about right. More silence. Then, from the back of the room, came a sound that Chen had never heard before from a Galactic Council session. Laughter. It started with one of the younger representatives, spread to several others, and within moments had infected half the room. This is wonderful, declared Ambassador Kick-7 of the Andromedan Federation, his mechanical voice, unit crackling with what sounded suspiciously like delight. For 3,000 years, the Council has operated on the principle of logical consensus and predictable response patterns. And now you tell us that the solution to our greatest threats is to be completely unpredictable. Not just unpredictable, Admiral Torres corrected. Stubbornly, aggressively, creatively unpredictable. There's a difference. Commander Zith-Ka raised one of his 4 hands for attention. There is, of course, the question of what happens now. The Council has protocols for integrating new species, but nothing for this. What do you mean? Chen asked. I mean, Zith-Ka said carefully, that in 6 months you have solved 3 extinction-level threats, revolutionized combat doctrine for 17 different species, and somehow managed to turn a mining operation in the Vega system into a first contact scenario with a previously unknown civilization that had been hiding from Omega-12 for the past 8,000 years. Dr. Tanaka looked mildly embarrassed. That last one was actually an accident. We were just trying to extract rare earth elements, and we accidentally drilled into their underground city. Very apologetic about that, by the way. The point is, Zith-Ka continued, that humanity is changing everything, and the Council needs to decide how to handle that. Chen leaned back in her chair, studying the faces around the room. She could see fear there, yes, but also hope. And something else. A kind of excitement she hadn't expected. What are you proposing? She asked. A new category of Council membership. Not junior partners, not senior advisors, but... Zith-Ka paused, clearly struggling with the concept. Chaos consultants? The human delegation exchanged glances. Chen could practically see the wheels turning in their heads as they considered the implications. Earth had sent them here as representatives of a minor species, hoping to find their place in galactic civilization. Instead, they'd apparently become the galaxy's go-to experts for solving impossible problems through creative application of stubbornness and spare parts. What exactly would that involve? Admiral Torres asked. When the Council faces a threat that conventional wisdom says is impossible to overcome, we call humans. You come in, ignore all the established protocols, argue with each other until you find a solution, and then save everyone using methods that shouldn't work, but somehow do. Chen felt a familiar surge of pride in her species. It wasn't the role they'd expected when they first ventured out into the stars, but it was perfectly, uniquely human. There's just one condition, she said finally. Name it, Zith-Ka replied immediately. Requirement to file reports in triplicate before we're allowed to save everyone's lives. When you call us, you get us. Messy, chaotic, unpredictable, and effective. And coffee, Dr. Tanaka added seriously. We're going to need a lot of coffee, and the right to complain about everything while we're saving it, Admiral Torres chimed in. And permission to use whatever's lying around as improvised weapons, came a voice from the back of the human delegation. Zith-Ka looked around the room at his fellow council members, reading expressions and body language from dozens of different species. What he saw there was unanimous: hope, relief, and the kind of desperate gratitude that comes from finally finding a solution to problems that had seemed unsolvable. Very well, he said formally. By unanimous consent of the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby designated as Chaos Consultants with full authority to ignore established protocols when dealing with extinction-level threats. The cheer that went up from the assembled representatives was unlike anything in the Council's 3,000-year history. It was loud, chaotic, and came from 47 different species, all expressing joy in their own unique ways. Chen stood up, extending her hand to Zith-Ka in the human gesture of agreement. Commander, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. As Zith-Ka awkwardly attempted to return the handshake with his crystalline appendages, Chen caught sight of a message scrolling across Dr. Tanaka's tablet. It was from Earth Command, and it was marked urgent. What is it? She asked quietly. Dr. Tanaka looked up with the expression of someone trying very hard not to laugh. We've got another situation. Something called the Void Singers has appeared in the Rigel system. According to the report, they're entities that drive entire civilizations insane with their music. The local species are requesting immediate evacuation. How long do we have? Admiral Torres asked. The Beltron Confederacy lasted 18 hours before complete societal collapse. The Rigel colonies have been exposed for 6 hours. Chen looked around the room at the other humans, seeing the same expression on every face. The look of people who had just been handed another impossible problem and were already figuring out how to solve it. Well, she said finally, I guess we'd better get going. Anyone know if ship-to-ship karaoke systems can be weaponized? The expression on Zith-Ka's face was priceless. You're not serious. Commander, Chen said with a grin that was equal parts confidence and insanity. We're humans. We're always serious, even when we're being completely ridiculous. 3 hours later, the human task force Discordant Harmony was en route to the Rigel system. Their cargo holds filled with everything from industrial sound dampeners to a complete collection of Earth's most aggressive death metal music. Captain Martinez had volunteered to lead the mission, claiming that anyone who could survive his nephew's garage band practices could handle a few cosmic singers. Back on the council station, Zith-Ka stood at the observation deck, watching the human ships disappear into hyperspace. Around him, representatives from across the galaxy were already placing bets on how long it would take the humans to solve this latest crisis. The smart money was on 36 hours, but the Andromedan delegation was betting on 6, claiming that humans had a documented tendency to exceed all reasonable expectations when properly motivated. As the last human ship vanished into the stellar void, Zith-Ka reflected on how much the galaxy had changed in just 6 months. For the first time in millennia, civilizations were looking forward to the future instead of merely trying to survive it. Ancient threats that had seemed eternal were being reduced to footnotes in human mission reports. And somewhere out there, in a cargo hold that smelled of coffee and determination, a group of humans was probably already arguing about the best way to fight cosmic horror with the power of rock and roll. The galaxy, Zith-Ka realized with something approaching wonder, was about to become a much more interesting place. In the depths of space unknown to any monitoring system, something ancient and terrible stirred in response to the death of Omega-12. It had been sleeping for eons, waiting for the right moment to emerge and reclaim its dominion over the stars. But as it began to wake, it detected something unexpected, the quantum signature of a species that had just proven capable of killing gods. A species that treated the impossible as merely improbable, and the improbable as Tuesday. For the first time in its existence, the ancient terror felt something it had never experienced before. Curiosity. What, it wondered, would happen when an unstoppable force met an immovable object that was too stubborn to know it was supposed to move? The universe was about to find out. The end.